Hey, it's Alan. I get asked all the time, how exactly does Kadima help people? There are three primary ways. One, we provide one-on-one personalized career coaching with a focus on getting you a great job. Two, we provide an online do-it-yourself course where you can work at your own pace. Three, if you have a job offer, we'll help you negotiate for more. So to find out about these great services and everything else that we offer at Kadima, sign up for our newsletter. Go to SYCKpodcast.com. That's SYCK podcast.com. I promise you, it'll be the best newsletter to accelerate your career. Thanks a lot.
Live from Brooklyn, welcome to the SYCK Podcast, starring Alan Stein, where he steers your career with Kadima. Along with Alan, I'm Russ Reba. Today, we present to you another episode featuring SYCK tricks, and Alan's guest, Viktoriya, came to the U.S. from Ukraine. He met her during his Google years, and we're going to hear how she became a part of Alan's team. But before we get into that, let's dive into a little snippet of Alan's life when he's not helping professionals expand their career. You know, we like to know what he does on his spare time. How is life? How are the kids? What's happening?
Hey, Russ, thanks for asking. So just this past weekend, my two boys, my twin boys, Jonah and Lucas, both took the SATs, and they applied a very similar strategy of how I recommend to my clients of just keep applying, just keep practicing. So they're taking the SAT early in the school year as opposed to waiting till May. And as we're recording this in October, so it's pretty early in the school year. And if they don't do well, they'll just take it again. My son Jonah, who was on top of things, registered and scheduled his SAT test about 10 blocks away from our house. So he walked there. My procrastinating son Lucas did not get that information in as quickly, so I had to take him to Staten Island.
Oh, gosh. And pay the tolls.
Yep, and I was not able to drive him back, so that Uber car trip back cost him $50.
Now, I find it interesting that you say how taking the SAT is kind of like a little practice in life and in future careers and what have you. And it's so funny because I can't tell you how often I hear my kids say, oh, you know, I'm taking this class, and it's like, I don't know why I have to take this class. I'm never going to use this in life for what I want to do. But it's interesting. Even the SAT can help you later in life. So I found that part of your story very interesting.
Yeah, it's a means to an end. Like, it doesn't necessarily do anything except get you to the next stage in your life. So, yeah, you got to take this shit.
Yeah, 100%. All right, so let's transition into SYCK tricks with Viktoriya Massand right here on the SYCK Podcast.
So I'm really excited to have Viktoriya Massand here on the podcast. I've known Viktoriya now for, I think, 6 years or so, looking back on LinkedIn, which is better than my memory. And I'll give a brief introduction to Viktoriya. We met at our time during Google. I inherited her as part of a reorg, and I would love to have Viktoriya tell her perspective of that. But the best introduction I can do of her is actually, I was looking on your LinkedIn profile today, and I wrote you a recommendation back in June of 2015. So I'm just going to read that, and because this pretty much summarizes you. I said back in June of 2015, I've just begun working with Viktoriya 7 months ago after a very disruptive reorg placed her on my team. I can't sing high enough praises on how fantastic she is to work with. While some folks bitched and moaned post-reorg, Viktoriya immediately impressed me with her can-do attitude. She was not put into the most ideal role, but took it maturely and has become one of my stronger performers in terms of delivering impact, collaborating cross-functionally, taking on whatever crosses her plate, and has a unique desire to excel at everything she does. Of note, I want to highlight some key strengths of hers: ability to get things done cross-functionally. Second, customer focused. Third, easy to work with. 4, strong interest and ability to learn. So I don't offer such high praise too easily for folks, but Viktoriya is special. So with that big head, would just love to hear a little bit about you and how you came to be on my team and what your impressions were. Because I remember my impressions of you, but this is what I said 7 months after meeting you.
Thank you so much, Alan, for such an amazing introduction. I'm sitting here blushing. As Alan had said, I'm Viktoriya Massand. I grew up in Kiev, Ukraine, And then I came to the US when I was 16, almost 17 years old, and immediately went to college, Purdue University, about 3 or so months after arriving to the US. I was about 20 years old. And before I even finished, one of my professors introduced me to a company called Sallie Mae. And so Sallie Mae became my first employer. I did tech support for them, actually, my first couple of years at Sallie Mae. And my customers were basically the entire sales force of Sallie Mae. And Sallie Mae, by the way, is a student loan company. A lot of people that do have student loans have heard of Sallie Mae. So a couple of years into my tech support career, I got noticed by the sales teams that I was supporting, and they actually asked me to join their team as a program manager for student loan programs for law students and then MBA students. So I went from a tech support person to a program manager, basically in a matter of like a week. I had no program management experience, but I was lucky because they believed in me and they gave me the job. And so I supported those two loan programs for about 3.5 years. At the same time, I was actually pursuing my MBA degree at Indiana University. And so once I finished my MBA, I wanted a pay raise. And so I started looking around and I find a job in the utilities industry, which was 2 minutes away from my house. Again, this is all Indianapolis, Indiana. And so I became a part of the operations strategic planning team, actually, working for the company. I was there for 2.5 years, supporting the CEO of the company, one of the VPs of the company, with some strategic planning exercises. While at that company, I met my husband. My husband was living and working in San Jose. And so I decided that I would move to San Jose to be with my husband. And right around the time that we decided that it would be me who would be moving versus him, I saw an article in Fortune that said that Google was about to hire 6,500 people. And I thought, well, I could be one of those people. So immediately, I still remember it was Valentine's Day of 2011. I sat down, I've applied for 40 jobs. I basically applied for any job, every job that I thought I could do. So I applied for about 40 jobs and Google reached out to me the next day. I at first, I thought it was spam. I couldn't believe that Google would be writing to me so quickly, but they did. So I waited for a few days and then I thought, well, what if it's not a spam? I cannot miss out on this opportunity. So I wrote back. And by the end of the week, I had an interview lined up with my first manager, Nikki Hettinger. I still remember Nikki and still talk to her every once in a while. And so that was mid-February when we first spoke, Nikki and I. And then my first day at Google was 11th of April of 2011. So I started in ads. It was a services role. So I worked very closely with sales reps, media agencies, and then also engineering team to roll out what we used to call dynamic campaigns, which were the campaigns that would change depending on who the user was. Then we went through a big reorg and I ended up on Alan's team. I supported Alan until my maternity leave, at which point in my performance review, Alan told me that I was doing great, but that he wanted me to find a different job because the job I would be coming back to was not going to kind of take advantage of my skills and my abilities to the best of my abilities. So I took Alan very seriously, immediately started looking for other great positions at Google and ended up in Google Cloud. And actually, thanks to Alan, because he was the one who wrote a really, really nice letter of recommendation to my manager at that time, which convinced him to hire me. And so from there, I was a partner manager. So it's a person that takes care of companies that Google Cloud partners with. I then moved into operations and programs role and finally got the opportunity to launch one of the most important go-to-market benefits for Google Cloud, which I still own. It's called ISV Solution Connect.
Awesome. Let's jump right in with SYCK trick number 1, applying and interviewing at Google. I'm particularly interested in when you moved out to San Jose, you read this article about, I guess, Google and other companies, and you applied to 40 different roles at Google, or were there 40 different companies?
I just applied to Google. I called my husband immediately and I said, hey, how close is Google to your house? And he said, 25 minutes. I said, okay, 25 minutes for work. They're hiring 6,500 people. And so I just applied to Google. And I still remember the day. It was a snowstorm in Indianapolis, Indiana. So I couldn't get out of the house. So my only task was apply for these jobs. And so I did apply for 40 jobs. I had some other companies in mind that I would have applied to work for if Google didn't respond, but they responded the next day. So I didn't apply anywhere else, just Google, 40 jobs.
Wow. And how did you figure out which jobs to apply for? And like now Google actually limits it. I believe they limit you to 3 applications over a 90-day period, but back then apparently they didn't. How did you pick the 40? Like, because you could have done it 1,000 times, or you could have done it 3 times.
That's right. And now, actually not even now, but once I started working for the company, I've realized that the jobs I was applying for was a variation of actually the same job. So the company it was all on the ad side, and I was looking for basically a profile that just kind of like could get things done. That didn't require any like a very specific skill set. I, of course, did not want engineering jobs because I was not an engineer and Google was hiring. I didn't really want a sales job. I didn't have any experience in sales. So I was looking for kind of like a very generic job with emphasis on execution, because I knew that I had a strong bias for action. So anything that was execution focused, I had a shot at getting. And so that's what I focused on. And again, Google didn't have like all the different options that it currently has. So ads was probably still is the biggest thing. But at the time, ads was who was hiring the most. And so they had all these, we used to be called campaign managers roles. And it's essentially was a services role to work with agencies, work with sales teams to make sure that whatever was sold was executed on, and that the agencies could deliver different types of campaigns to their customers. And so mine just happened to be the team that hired me was a dynamic campaign team, but there were other teams that were hiring very similar type of people. And without realizing it, I've applied for every kind of campaign manager that there was out there.
So you had no ad tech background previously. Did you even know what ad tech was when you applied to Google?
No, not at all. I did not know what a click or impression was. I still remember my recruiter before I had the informal interview with Nikki. He actually sent me some keywords that I was supposed to study up on. And I spent 60 hours preparing for that one informal interview. And I spent about the same amount of time preparing for every subsequent interview that I've had with Google. I've had, I think, 4 different rounds, and each round I spent about that amount of time. So reading up on terminology, just kind of knowing what it is. I've read, I don't think every single Google's financial report, but at least a few, most recent ones. So it was 2011, so probably 2010, 29, 28. I knew that Larry Page was coming back as the CEO, and, was curious to ask people what they thought it meant for the company. So I was definitely up on the company news. So about 60 hours every time. But no, I had no idea what an agency was. I've never spoken with one. I've never seen one. I've never been inside of one. So it was all new to me.
I joined a month after you. I joined in May of 2011, and I didn't know you until probably 4 years later. But I also came in with no technical background, and I did a lot of the research that you did. I read through the 10Ks, the SEC reports and things like that, and looked at some stuff on TechCrunch or whatever. And I studied up on CPMs, like cost per thousand. I was never asked any questions about that on my interview. I'm curious. And I also did some other methods. I learned about case-based interviewing and how to interview for that, and behavioral-based interviewing I was already familiar with. But all that planning and research about Larry Page coming back, which I probably asked questions about that too, because Larry just came back. Was that even asked, or like, was that important as part of your interview process to the extent that you recall? It's like a decade ago now, but.
So it was important with one of the interviewers.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've met Karna.
Oh yeah. Karna. I know Karna. I still stay in touch with him.
They told me it was an informal interview, but he was the toughest one. And he asked some technical questions, not necessarily about the financial statements, but more kind of the role-related knowledge type questions. So I was in that moment, I was very happy that I've done all the studying. Now for kind of the background on Google, nobody asked for that information. But what I did is I offered it up proactively as a part of the conversation. So I made sure that in maybe not every, but in many answers that I gave, I somehow weaved in the information that was in those reports and those statements to make sure that my listener, my interviewer was, had a good understanding that I've done my homework. There was one interview panel, one round, where they were interviewing a lot of candidates, probably for very similar roles. And it was actually in New York. And who knows, maybe you were in that lobby too, waiting for your interview. But it was interesting because that particular round, I think Googlers were interviewing a lot of candidates, and I might have been towards the end of the Q&A. So people that were interviewing me seemed very fatigued, very tired. And so I kind of took it upon myself to interview them about the role they were interviewing for. And I have to say, I sort of flipped it a little bit on its head, the interview, where I asked most of the questions and they answered. And I could just see sort of like a relief on their faces. Like it was something new. It was different from what they've done all day that day. And it was exciting for them to talk to me. So it was very conversational. It was very little about me in that specific round and much more about kind of the ecosystem in general, the team that was hiring, the work-life balance. I remember touching on work-life balance. It was very intense at the time, and kind of what they did, their teams did, and what they were looking for to relieve some of the burden that they were carrying at that point. So that was an interesting round. The rest of them were about me, but I took it upon myself to make sure that they knew that I've read, to make sure that they knew that I've studied.
So it sounds like that might have been part of a batch interview process where they were looking to hire like a mass amount of people. For your title there was a client services manager. So they're probably hiring 5 CSMs at that time, or I guess that's what they call them, even though CSMs are often a different term.
Exactly. And I think it was not 5. I think it was probably like 50.
Okay.
A huge number of people.
So you came very well prepared, and I know you, from the extent that I know you and the fact that you did so much research, I'm sure you presented yourself well, but you had no technical background besides what you were like researching for that role.
No, not at all. I mean, my tech support background really didn't mean anything in the world that, I was about to step into. I kind of feel like the biggest thing that maybe impressed, and this information was never shared with me, but I just suspect that what was really interesting to the people that interviewed me was the fact that I was also an adjunct faculty at that time at the IU School of Business. It was a job that one of my professors offered to me for the summer, but then it lasted for a couple of years. And so a lot of what I think the interviewers were trying to kind of get at is how good a person would be in front of a customer. And so by explaining to them what I've done for the university and the work that I did with students every single semester was maybe convincing enough to make them believe that I would be presentable. I think that was maybe, what they weighed as kind of as sort of the highest value that I had to bring. I also, once I stepped into my role and I looked to the left, I looked to the right, most everybody who kind of shared the same role as me didn't have the ed tech background. They hired a lot of very junior consultants. So they've had other experience, but not ed tech experience. But the company probably knew that they're smart and flexible, quick learners. And so that was sort of the profile that the company was looking at for the most part. So the fact that I didn't have the ed tech experience, I don't think mattered that much because most of the people who surrounded me at the time didn't have it either. We all learned together.
Okay. So, and you were coming from, I'm looking at your LinkedIn profile, a strategic planning analyst at Midwest ISO
Yes.
in Indiana.
Yes.
And you moved out to San Jose with your husband. And then very quickly you got this job at Google.
So I accepted the offer on Friday. I resigned from MISO on Monday. And then 2 weeks later, I was in California. I celebrated my grandma's 85th birthday on Saturday, which was 9th of April. I got on the plane on the 10th of April. And then on the 11th of April, it was a Monday, I was in the new hire orientation at Google. So very, very quickly. But the full cycle from me applying to Google to actually stepping through the door and getting my picture taken for the ID was 8 weeks, if I remember correctly.
Okay, which is still that's really fast. It might have seemed long to you, but like
my mom, she just couldn't believe how long Google was taking to hire the best thing that she's had. So
yeah, I'm trying to think my process. I probably started in February and started in May, so about 3 months for me.
Okay.
And yours sounds like 2 months or so?
Yes.
Yeah. So when you had this offer, you got this offer from Google, I'm assuming coming from Google versus a small company in Indiana, the amount was considerably higher. Was like Was the compensation much higher than your previous compensation?
The compensation was much higher, actually, especially given that MISO is a non-for-profit company. So there's no stock options. Yeah, that kind of stuff just didn't exist. And my previous company, actually, Salome, they did have stock options, but they were, by the time I left them to join MISO, they were not doing very well. It was 2008, and many financial services companies were struggling. So those options were not very valuable. Now, Google stock was about $400 a share at the time I was joining Google. So the compensation seemed extremely high, which probably, that coupled with the fact that I really, really wanted to move to California, coupled with the fact that I didn't know a single soul at Google, literally zero people, coupled with the fact that the internet research was telling me that Google does not negotiate on salaries, caused me to not be aggressive at all at negotiating. So what I did was, rightly or wrongly, but I took what Google offered. The only thing that I negotiated was to help them get them paid for my relocation. So they did include relocation into my comp package after I negotiated that.
Okay, so at least you got some of that. I just said, where do I sign? And I didn't negotiate at all because it was just so much more than my previous comp. And I wasn't even moving from Indiana to California. Mine was all in New York. You got the offer. Now what? Sick trick number 2. I met you about 4 years later, and the scouting report I heard about you when you joined my team, because you joined as part of a reorg, and as for people that don't know, these reorgs happen at the higher level. Lots of high-level people are moving boxes around on a PowerPoint or Google Slides. At that point, I think we used PowerPoint at Google. And they put people around, and they might be moving around 2,000 chips, and they really only know the leaders because the leaders are worrying about their fiefdoms, and then everything else kind of falls in place. And of that, maybe 5 or 10% of people are just in a bad situation. But like others, you changed manager and changed team, or I think you were working on mobile. And so you had the same role, but then you moved from one manager to me.
Yeah. So for me, I changed managers and roles, actually. So what I did, I started out as, the services person. I was very much client facing, going to the client sites. Usually it was LA or Seattle or Las Vegas. Sometimes that's where the agency were, talking to them about their needs and then coming back to Mountain View and executing on those needs. But that was kind of the first couple of years. Then the role evolved. We realized that we needed different tiering structure. And so we had, campaign managers that started acquired some of the skills that we had and some of our responsibilities. And then dynamic specialists, which is what I was originally called, we became more specialized and started to focus more on feature commercialization. So we were more like consultants to engineering. So what features are necessary and how to correctly roll them out. And then also consultants to these campaign managers that would ultimately put those features in place. So campaign managers would call on us. We would help them launch these campaigns, but they were ultimately responsible for working with customers directly and responsible for the timely and correct delivery of the service. So I went from working closely with engineering, somewhat closely with customers and sales reps, to becoming one of the members of, what do we call it? It was a tech support team, Alan, but there was a name to global support.
Okay. Global, like it was just GS, global support.
Global support. And so my specialty remained. So if I remember correctly, I was still assigned to this dynamic ads product, but instead of defining the feature strategy, working with engineering on the feature rollout, I was supposed to be the support person that would take tickets that were logged by the campaign managers, answer those tickets timely and correctly, and then move on to the next ticket. I have to be honest with you, I was not very excited about the outcome of that reorg.
And it wasn't leveraging your strength. You were just a box that let's move this person over there.
That's right. But I got lucky. I got a good manager.
Well, but I'm sure you had concerns. You're like, what the hell are they doing to me? Like, I remember I was handed about probably 10% of the team, like Ben Pig and some other folks that came into the role. And now all of a sudden you guys are supposed to be doing support cases, which you could probably, I'm sure you could figure out how to do, but it's not what you joined Google for. It's not a good use of your skills and your capabilities.
Yes, no, I definitely felt that way. And I have to admit, I went home and I cried with real tears. And I don't do that often because I was just very, very worried about what kind of my day to day would be. And then also what the rest of my future would be, because I was worried that if I become this ticket taker, then that would be my future. Then for the rest of my life, I'll essentially do nothing but take tickets.
How was it conveyed to you? Because I remember the way it was conveyed to me, but I was brought in ahead of it. But how was it conveyed to you?
I remember Warren calling us into the room, and there were 3 groups of people, I believe. And he basically said, the reason why you guys are all together is because there's 3 groups of people, but the common thing is you're all going to be reporting to 3 different Daves. Do you remember you had a David? I forget his last name.
Dave De Silva, or David Schreiber?
Somebody else, but I think his name was Dave. But basically, we were all getting the same manager with the same name. So you're getting this. I think it was David. You're getting a Dave, and then Viktoriya and team, you're getting this Dave, and this is what you're going to do. You'll be a part of the global support, working on ads, and then these 5 people go to a different Dave, doing something else, and then a third group of people gets Dave 3, doing something else. Go talk to your Dave if you have a concern. This is, by the way, Dave is going to report to Alan Stein. So, any questions, go talk to Dave or Alan Stein. And if you're really sad, we've set up some hours with HR that you can sign up for and discuss your concerns with them.
I'm laughing. I feel so bad, but this is how it was done.
So we got 3 Daves. And so I went home, I cried. And then I realized that if I was still in the Ukraine, I would probably be dying to get a global support role because we just didn't have opportunities to work at Google. We didn't have the same opportunities. So I was like, well, Viktoriya, if you were still in the Ukraine, you would probably be, working at McDonald's, and thought that was amazing. So this global support at Google would have been truly a dream job. So you might as well embrace it and see what you can do with it. And, maybe it's not for life. And so, and then I also kind of, I was processing it. I did it very quickly because there was no time to waste. But then I also realized that people like Daves, like the 3 Daves, like you guys probably didn't self-select in it either. So there was no reason whatsoever to be upset about Daves and Alans because that was not your choice either. The best thing I could do for myself is find out how I could make myself useful. And so that's when I set up a meeting with you and maybe even Dave to find out what I could do to kind of move forward, because that was the only way that I could get myself out of the deep sadness that I was feeling.
Yeah. And from my perspective, I was given a set of all these new people on my team, and I was brought in a little bit earlier in the process. And I was like the woman who is leading the reorg brought me in at some point, and Manaza, and we started talking about people. And she was like, do you want these people on your team or not? And I'm like, well, can I get back to you? Some of the names I don't know. Can I do some research on these people? And there were some names that I was like, no, I don't want to touch that one with a 10-foot pole. Give that to someone else. And they knew no names. And I knew probably 25% of the names, but I was able to find out about the other names. And there were some people that I tried to get rid of before I inherited them. Anyway, it was just a very weird situation. But it was very interesting because I inherited a lot of people in your situation, and people were very disgruntled, and people react to it in a different way. And the way that you reacted to it, I think, was phenomenal, because you're like, hey, you got emotional, you got through all, you got emotional over it, but you're like, in the scheme of things, you were able to kind of take a little perspective on things. But I had people that were really distraught, and different people can handle things differently, and they acted up very differently, which made it a very adversarial relationship for them and for me. It was not pleasant for anybody.
Most definitely. And you know what, this perspective that I have from growing up in the Ukraine, just seeing people not getting salary for forever. My mom's an engineer, wouldn't get her salary for years, even though she went to work daily, things like that. And just not knowing how you're going to survive. Then it makes a reorg like that, even though it's upsetting, because I've gotten used to the life in the US, and I still felt like I could do a job that seemed, maybe better, more interesting, more complex, I was able to go back to my Ukraine days. They were only, maybe 10 years away or 11 years away, and remind myself kind of, how the rest of the population in some of these other countries live, and that I still had it really good and I still get to work for a fantastic company. So that was super helpful.
So the path that you took is one that I often advise to my clients and friends of: choose the company. I would tell people to choose more than one company, but it worked for you choosing one company. Get your foot in the door there any way that you can, and then figure stuff out. And you've really done that. And you've had 4 or 5 different jobs in your, I guess it's hard to determine the number of jobs. How many jobs would you say that you had in your time at Google, in your 10 and a half years at Google?
I would say, and I'm not counting the global support job because you probably don't remember this, but I never ended up taking a single ticket, because what we needed to do first before people could take tickets is create infrastructure for ticket taking. And so that's what I focused on before I went out on maternity leave. So I'm not going to, maybe that is a job actually. So
right. I think I even recalled having that conversation of go on maternity leave and get some other job so you don't have to come back and take tickets or something like that.
Yes. No, I remember that. That was part of my performance review is awesome job setting up. When you come back, all I have is tickets. So please don't come back. So I would say 6 jobs. The first one when I was purely responsible for execution. The second one when I was a consultant. 2 people responsible for execution. The third one setting up global support infrastructure for us and your team. The fourth one being a partner manager for a year when I moved off of the global support role. Then kind of operations/programs role. And then finally, my last 4 years, actually the longest I've ever done anything, was leading this go-to-market program called ISV Solution Connect.
So what are some of the similar threads there? And what were the threads that got you? One of them was a reorg. Which of those other roles were by your choice and which were chosen for you?
I think the rest of them, except for the reorg, all the other roles were chosen for me. Were chosen by me. Yeah, were chosen by me. I think, the common thread is,
or maybe there isn't a common thread.
I'm just thinking being super open-minded and a good executor, because what that signaled to at least my management team is that they could give me anything and I would get it done with a smile on my face, and it would be all right. And so when stuff needed to be handed out, I would get projects. And I would really own those projects. I would run them like it was my business, like my life, truly depended on it. Like it was an independent business outside of Google. And so because I take my work very seriously, for this last program, I've been able to grow it into a full-time job, not only for myself, but also for 3 other full-time people and 4 other TVCs. But it all started out with, it was just a slide that was handed to me as, you want to try this. So I think the common thread is I take work very seriously. I'm open-minded about these projects. I don't kind of shun them away. I try it, and then I really nurture them.
SYCK trick number 3, changing roles and asking for a promotion. Why do you leave jobs then? Is it have you been attracted to a job for a reason, or have you left jobs then? Because you're kind of open-minded about the type of projects that you're taking on, and you're successful at executing them. I'm assuming that you're pretty successful in each of your 6 roles based on my limited knowledge of you and who you are. But what would lead you then to move on to the next role? If, outside of the reorg, which wasn't your choice.
Yes, no, for sure. So if we look at the kind of first half of my career at Google in ads, the first leap from, being purely customer facing to being more of a consultant, it felt like a natural progression, being closer to engineering, advising engineering on what needs to happen, telling them exactly how it needs to happen, felt more of sort of a higher level thinking and doing than just purely executing on, what the customer told you. So, and it was just more interesting and utilized skill sets that I wasn't utilizing with customers, like documentation, like go-to-market aspects. And it allowed me to engage with the sales reps on a broader level, not just the ones that were aligned with my customers, but kind of like all the sales reps that worked on the product that I was aligned to. So that was one. So again, like just felt like, different types of skills and a broader role. Then when global support, of course, was a reorg. When I became a partner manager, I just wanted a foot in the door at Google Cloud. So the way that I went about getting out of global support is the same way that I went about getting out of actually Indiana. I've looked at everything that we have posted on our internal job site Pro, selected roles that I thought I could do, again, based on, kind of the skills that I've developed at Google. And what I really liked about the role that I ultimately ended up getting was, it had all the standard kind of position description, so on and so forth. I knew that I would be able to do that role. But then at the top, the manager wrote sort of like a paragraph that I've never seen anybody else do. And it said, like, if you want to join a really fun team with like focus management, high promo rates. And then I think he added something along the lines of having 100% success at promoting candidates. Like basically none of the candidates that he's ever put out for promotion has been rejected. And that's a really kind of high standard. This guy, has been a manager for a really long time. So I thought, oh, wow, like I like how he's marketing himself and his team. So I've reached out to him and it clicked immediately. Like I was on maternity leave. I think I still had at least 10 weeks of maternity leave left. And then he hired me. He waited for 10 weeks for me to come back. And when I came back, he hired a partner in crime for me to work with. And he ended up being one of my favorite colleagues to work with ever. But again, it was just kind of like a gut feel, like I can do this job. This seems interesting. It will develop a new skill set, yet I'll feel comfortable stepping into it. And I like the hiring manager because he's done something extra to attract people to this position. So that was that one. Then there was another reorg. So when I transitioned from the partner manager role to the operations team role, there was a reorg. And I secretly believe that the person that was reorging didn't quite know what to do with me and a couple of other people. And so, but she knew she needed to get stuff done. So she was like, okay, well, this will be my execution army. So she made me and two other people her execution army and called us operations and programs. We didn't do anything for the programs. We just focused on operations and helping her set up her team. And then a year later, she hired a person to really, really manage programs. And so that person picked us up. By the time it was just me left, the other two dropped off. So it was him and I, and he wanted to launch a couple of things. And I was his employee number one. Then he hired one more person. It was kind of like, I've got these two projects, here you go. And I took, whatever was handed to me and I built it into the program that I now own. So part of it is self-selected, but part of it really is, just the situation that I was put into that ended up extremely advantageous just by luck.
Yeah. And during your 10 and a half years, some of the, usually don't switch a role and get promoted, usually get promoted within a role. Was that the case with you? Like you got promoted within your role, not from moving over to another role?
That's right. So I've had 2 promotions at Google so far, and I'm really hopeful to go up again the next cycle, which is in February, March, April, that time frame. But so far 2 promotions, and both within the role that I was a part of for a little while.
So thinking back on your first promotion at Google, what was the process like for you? Did you have to push for it? Did you think it was appropriately timed? Did you have to toot your own horn?
So with both promotions, I had to ask for it. I have the same process. I'm going to follow that process next time as well. And the process involves me writing up my promo packet and then setting up a meeting with my director, running him through the packet and asking them if they think there's anything in that packet that makes them think that I'm not executing at the next level. So I've done that twice now. So far, the answer was always, no, I think you're executing at the next level. Let's go for it. Again, I'm planning on doing it again next February. But they've never had any concerns, which tells me that maybe I waited too long. But it made me feel good that I felt super ready. I actually don't want to do it until I feel like I'm ready. it just, it's maybe a little more intimidating, a little more scary. I want to know that in my world, I've worked for it, I've deserved it, I'm there. And I felt that way each time, but nobody has offered a promotion to me ever.
But in both cases, you thought that you had a significant body of work, and you set up a meeting. Like in both cases, did you set up a meeting with your manager and said,
Yes.
hey, like, can I put this together for you? Or did you just put it together and show up at the meeting?
Yeah, I put it together and showed up at the meeting and said, I would like to go out for promo. I've been in this role for X number of years, and I want to walk you through my packet and get your feedback and see if you think that, the timing is right. But in my heart, I felt that the timing was definitely right. And I was prepared to argue if they thought the timing was not right.
Yeah. And how did you even know to do that the first time? So the second time I can understand, okay, the first time worked, I'll continue this method. The first time, who gave you that idea? Because like I've worked with, like I've managed lots of people, and did I promote you? And like, did you do this process with me?
No, we discussed it. And the thought was I come back from maternity leave, do some great stuff, and then you put me out for promotion. But because I never came back, you never got the opportunity to do that.
But like, who gave you that initial idea? Because like I've had different people approach me as a manager in different ways, and I can imagine you doing it a logical, well thought out way. But who gave you this idea?
The idea, the specific idea, I think I came up with on my own. The idea of actually having everything prepped and delivered. I think the idea that it was, especially the first time that it was time for me to get promoted, was that my colleagues kept getting surprised that I was at the level that I was at the time. And like every single person was getting surprised. And so I thought, well, if 10 out of 10 people are significantly surprised by the level that I'm at, I think I'm at the wrong level. So it's time for me to go. And so I brought it up with my manager who managed me when I was a partner manager. He was on board. This is the person that has 100% approval rate. So he was on board. He was supposed to put me out for promotion at the appropriate time. And that's when actually the reorg happened. I got a new manager, but I was ready. I was so ready. So I probably surprised her a little bit with what I had. But she was very bought in. Once I walked her through the package, she was very bought in. She was so bought in that, that after the reorg, in the next 6 months, we had another cycle. And usually after you get promoted, as you know, Alan, you get rated as constantly meets expectations. If you actually meet the expectations or consistently meets expectations. Yeah. She actually said that, now that I've worked with you, now that I know kind of the level that you operated, I think we promoted you too late. So she gave me exceeds expectations that following quarter because she thought that I should have been promoted much earlier than I was.
Yeah. And that is true. That's usually the default as a manager. When someone gets promoted, you give them a CME or like a meets expectations. Almost every organization I've ever worked at has that stupid rule, which disincentivizes people after they get promoted. It can disincentivize people.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It probably didn't in your case. And you work for a manager who is willing to push the boundaries a little bit. She had to ask someone for permission because otherwise the default is meets expectation.
Yeah, I was pleasantly surprised. But of course, also in the back of my mind, I was thinking, gosh, I probably should have been promoted a couple of years earlier, but it is what it is.
In both situations, when you came up and asked for promotion, it was successful. What sort of information did you put in this packet? And like Google talks about these packets, but honestly, all they are a couple of bullet points on people. Like in the engineering side, I think it's a little bit more intense, but unless they've dramatically changed calibration, you talk about Viktoriya Massand in one word, what she does, and you have like 3 bullet points of what she's accomplished and how it compares to her peers. Like if you did like the top 20% in something, and then you talk about like strengths and AFDs, areas for development. And they talk about you for 0 to 30 seconds at calibration. But what did you do to help your boss with your manager?
To be honest with you, in both cases, I kind of never structured my work to help my promo. I just, did my job and did things that were interesting to me. It sounds a little selfish, but it actually lends to better results when you do things that are exciting for you personally, that you think you're learning from. So that's kind of the work that I gravitated towards. And initially, at least for the first promo, I hardly ever said no to a project. If I thought I could learn from it, if it was interesting, I did not say no. I explored it and I got it, through to the end where it was meaningful and impactful and helpful to others. For the second promo, I can talk about it, but I became kind of, much more focused. And that was also on purpose. Again, not with the goal of being promoted, but with the goal of having my program be successful. And so for the first one, I had a very broad kind of set of projects that I've done in a very short time at that time, some of which were developer newsletters, some of which were managing partners, some of which were rolling out a CRM system for our entire organization to kind of, improve the visibility into the things that the entire team was doing. That was a very large scale, impactful project. I was doing all the operations for our org. It was 200 plus people, making sure that we had our OKRs, objectives, and set results set from the very top to the very bottom. All of that were organized, by me and delivered to our VP or director by the deadline. So it was a broad set of projects that touched every single person in the organization, all 200 and plus of them. And so I think what maybe helped my case is that not a single person in calibrations could say that they didn't know what I did. They probably had a position on like how I did it, but they knew exactly who I was. And so I'm suspecting that because I had, a broad set of successful projects and people knew exactly who I was, that was extremely helpful to the person that was promoting me. That was the first time. The second time I was launching a program. And at the time I still had a broad set of projects that I was running and this program. And so at some point I told my manager that if we want this program to be successful, I must focus on this program only. And I will not be building websites, and I will not be, setting objectives and key results, and I will not be rolling out any more systems. I will just be focusing on this GTM program. And so he took me seriously. Very rarely at Google, actually, you're able to kind of limit your scope to a single thing, but I was able to do that. And not only that, but I said, I'm going to focus on three things as it relates to this program. I'll develop this program. I will focus on operations for this program, which is a very important component. And I will focus on marketing this program to partners and to our sellers. It's a sales incentive program. And then I started reporting against these three priorities that I've come up for myself. And I would report on them regularly. And the results, luckily, were very positive. And the program very quickly, probably within a year, grew beyond one person. And I wouldn't let anything else distract me. When people would come to me and they would be like, we have another website to build. We hear you're great at building websites. I would say, well, I'm not, this is not developing my program. It's not promoting my program. No, it's related to the program operation. So yeah, I will not be doing this website. And that's how I kind of, kept myself focused. Because I kept myself focused, the program was very successful. And there's probably not a seller now, sales rep at Google Cloud who doesn't now leverage this program. So it's that big. And so I guess the impact from something that big was very helpful to my manager who was promoting me the second time. So then I was more narrow, but very, very deep and very big.
So have you always had the support of your manager? So like you're a very driven person. I think you're great at setting the priorities, and you told your manager of this is what I'm going to do. And do I have your support? And it sounds like he supported you there. Have you always had supportive managers? And if not, what have been the challenges?
I think that I have actually. I've either maybe had kind of like more junior, slightly disengaged managers that didn't know what to do with me. So then I sort of didn't even need to ask for support. I just did what I thought was best. And that was maybe mostly in ads, actually. In cloud, I have not encountered that. Most of the people were, very senior, who knew exactly what kind of they wanted to see out of me. But before they could tell me, I always had ideas of what I thought I needed to work on. And those ideas resonated, I think, with their vision. And so I've always felt like I was doing what I wanted to do, but it was also what was best for the organization. So like in that way, the interest of the company, my interest, what was like genuinely interesting for Viktoriya as a person, and my manager's interests aligned. So I was able to do what I wanted, but what I wanted to do was helpful for the company. So sort of lucky coincidence. I don't know. It's probably not a coincidence.
Yeah. No, and I think you are, because you are so effective at executing and you're also very flexible, you are a very good employee to have. And you're pleasant and you collaborate well effectively and you get shit done. And you're also comfortable with, if something new comes on your plate, you just roll with it. And it's worked out well for you. How have you thought about your career? Like, you've been in Google for the last 10 and a half years. Silicon Valley is a very lots of different opportunities out there. I'm sure you probably get approached at times, maybe you look at times. You've probably had managers that have moved on to other companies. What's been your thought process of staying at Google versus looking externally? And your husband, I think, has moved around, I think, from Amazon to Google as well.
That's true. Yes, he definitely moves around a lot. And I'm not like that. I really, really like Google. And I think my favorite thing about Google, and I say it when I interview people actually, is the fact that Google lets me choose what I'm going to do, how I'm going to do it, and then do it with very minimal supervision. So it allows me to grow my, strategic thinking skills, my creativity. It allows me to choose how to go about things, who to engage with, select my partners in crime, my stakeholders, my collaborators. And I just don't hear the same about other companies. And I think that's that kind of flexibility seems to be the most important attribute that a company can offer. And despite the fact that I know there's companies out there that would probably offer to pay me a bit better than Google, that the joy that I feel every day from coming, this is my work seat right behind me, walking over to my work seat, and then having the flexibility, the ability to decide what I would do today, who I'm going to do it with, how I'm going to go about it, that to me is priceless. So although I have probably 4 managers that I would love, who left Google, that I would love you being one of them, I would love to work for again. I want to do it at Google. I want them to come back so that I can work for my favorite people at Google, because Google really is my favorite company because of the flexibility that it's given to me.
Yeah, that's great. What would you have done different in your career, either at the very beginning of your career or 10 and a half years ago, looking back on things? I think things have worked out well for you. You've had two kids, I believe, over the last 10 and a half years as well.
2 kids.
And you got maternity leave. Did Google change the maternity leave policy between your 2 children, or was it the same for both?
No, it was the same. It's 18 weeks. It was 18 weeks with first and 18 weeks with second, which was awesome.
Which is great. But are there things you would have done differently or told yourself differently, like back in April of 2011 when you joined Google?
When I look at my career, even when I'm chatting with you, a lot of the things that happened to me was, like you said, because of a reorg or because somebody acquired me or because somebody had a project that they gave me and I made something huge and meaningful out of it. And maybe not because I've self-selected into something. Of course, I've self-selected to work for Google. I've applied for jobs at Google Cloud, but a lot of the decisions were made for me. And then I rolled with it and really enjoyed. I would like to see myself maybe even in the past and in the future to be kind of more involved in my own destiny. So next job I'm put into, I don't want to be put into it. I want to self-select into that role. I want to be selected for that role and go into that role. It actually doesn't mean that I'll like it better than the job that that I was put in as a reorg or because somebody wanted me there. But I want to see myself take a more active role in kind of where I end up, who I work for, and when those changes happen. I don't think I've done a terribly great job at doing that.
What do you think of, like, you've always been an individual contributor and not a people manager? Have you managed 2 people at home, your children, maybe your husband at times as well? Have you thought at all about the management track, or not of interest to you? Or how do you think about that in terms of your career path?
It's interesting to me. I've thought about it. It's definitely interesting to me. I have to say, I'm a little scared of it just because, it's like something you've never done. Sometimes people are scared about it. But just like when I came to my managers and fully knowing that I thought I was ready for a promotion, I do feel that I'm ready for responsibilities as a manager that I would do well, just like I did well in those calibrations and I got my promotions. I feel like I'll do well as a people manager. And I know that because of the work that I've done managing TVCs. TVC stands for temp vendor contractor. So these are employees that work at Google or people that work at Google on a short-term basis, working on specific projects. So I've had a series of these TVCs working for me, including now throughout the years. And they've all been, very, very happy on, being a part of my team. And, some people ask to be a part of my team when their other managers leave. So that's how I've inherited the current person that works for me. She wanted to work for me. So I know, I feel like, if I select 8 players and then manage 8 players, that would just be fantastic. And I feel like I'm ready for it, and I will develop a lot of skills that way too.
Nice. Listen up for SYCK trick number 4, what Google looks for in a candidate. So you're a big fan of Google, as you said, and for rightful reasons. I'm a big fan of Google. It's the only company I think I've left that I would return to. I don't know if they would have me, but that's another question. When you speak to people that are interested in Google, and I know I've shared lots of people with you, and I appreciate your generosity with them, what stands out about some people that approach you about potentially interest in Google versus those that you're like, what helps you help someone, or what indicates a good potential person versus someone that you're not as willing to help to refer into Google?
Yeah. So I think just like there are specific, it's not even work experience. It's basically they're almost like execution skills. Like, can they take something and get it done and show the results? There's a lot of people who seem to know in theory how things work or how to get things done. But when you ask them for specific examples, they have nothing to share. And I'm more thinking of interview candidates as opposed to people that you've sent my way, because I think you do a really, really good job screening those people. So they all have.
But other people, like not like, but I'm sure people know you work at Google. People know you're a big fan of Google, maybe through like local things. People say, "Oh, Viktoriya, I'd love to work at Google." What makes you more willing to help someone versus, this isn't Google material?
I want to know. So there's a few things. Personality, of course. I want them to be humble, but I want them to follow through. But I want them to follow through in a way that's not pushy and gentle. I want them to be generous. I don't necessarily want anything from them, but I want them to acknowledge that I'm going to spend my time with them, and time that I could be spending with my kids, with my husband. And so I want them, to be humble and generous in ways that I want to feel like they know that I'm, taking away from my family to help that person. But in terms of like the actual skill set, again, it's to go back to what I was just trying to say is I want to know that they can get things done. At Google, it's even as a manager, you have to be able to get things done and get it done on your own. Like I still remember, and I use this as an example of a training that I was supposed to deliver. And for whatever reason, you're not going to believe it, but the room that I had booked, our facility team was telling me that I couldn't have chairs. I don't even know why, because Google has loads of chairs and loads of rooms with chairs, but that room, they just wouldn't give me chairs. But I needed to conduct training and I needed for people to sit in these chairs. So what did I do? I found a party place that rented chairs. It was in Belmont. So me and the TVC that worked for me at that time, we rented a large car and he drove this car. I didn't, but we rode to this place together. We loaded up the chairs, we offloaded the chairs, we set up the room and we went for it. So like if I wanted that training and I wanted people to be comfortable, I had to go find a place, rent chairs. But it happens every day. Like if you want a piece of collateral, you might be a marketing director in that moment. If you want for somebody to give a speech, you're probably the one giving that speech. But so if you want a speech to be given, you give the speech. If you want to set an office hour, you're probably manning that office hour. So it's very, regardless of your level, like you have to be able to get hands dirty and do a lot of different things that maybe you haven't done before. And so when I talk to people about their experience, I look for that. I look for, their ability to handle ambiguity and just be unafraid to do things. And also, of course, have the motivation to kind of learn how to do things. So it's bias for action and results, not just, I've set out to do that and then nothing came out of it, but no, I've set out to do this. The chairs arrived and the training was conducted. That's what I want to hear.
Nice.
And I want repeated examples of that.
Cool, Viktoriya. Well, I have a couple of just fun rapid fire questions, and then we'll wrap this up. We can go on much more because at calibration, we didn't really cover much about how you influence that, but we can go on for years about that. But on the rapid fire side, what sort of podcasts or books or literature inspire you, either personally or from a career perspective? Are there people that you listen to or that help your mindset or change the way you focus on your career?
Not specific to career development. What I do mostly is just as I'm about to go to sleep, I scroll through LinkedIn and I see things that my colleagues, our leadership team comment on, and I read through all of those just to be super, super abreast about what's happening in the industry with Google Cloud, with partners. But I'm maybe ashamed to admit that I don't read leadership or career kind of development books. It's more about Google Cloud and other clouds and our partner products and what's happening with them.
So you spend a lot of time scrolling on LinkedIn?
That's right.
Cool. Sick trick number 5. What makes Google a great company to work for? So you do get paid well at Google and you've been there for 10 and a half years. What parts of your job do you love so much that, we don't have to tell your boss this, but that you love so much that you would do for free?
I would probably do my work for free. If I didn't need to make money, I would do what I do right now for free because I have full autonomy in kind of what I'm doing, how I'm running my program, how I approach the sales teams. So all of it, I really, really enjoy every single day of my career. Or every single day on the job. What I'm afraid of, though, is that I've ran operations for my program. I've optimized this program. I've probably changed the comp structure and other important elements of the program a number of times, and I think they're pretty optimized. There's very little changes I can make to make them even better. And I've done field enablement for the last 1.5 years. I've focused on that a lot. So what kept me in the same role for 4 years, which is a really long time, is the fact that I could kind of switch my focus areas. But now that I've hit all 4 of them, I worry that I'll get bored. And so there are 2 worries that I have: that I'll get bored of what I currently have, and that I will never find something as amazing as what I currently have. And it's so amazing that I truly would do it for free.
Now, fortunately for you, there's been lots of interesting jobs out there, and you've been really successful at kind of identifying your goal and achieving that goal. So I think it's a tribute to your perseverance and your grit and your attitude. Would you say anything else is driving, you've been unbelievably successful and not casting a super wide net at things, just being very focused and putting your efforts against it and succeeding. What do you think leads to that?
I think what you said, it's first of all, I want to be helpful. I think the desire to be helpful. When I built the program, I knew that it would be helpful for partners because I was a partner manager and they told me that they wanted that. And it would be helpful for sales because it required sales quotas. So I can be helpful through this program. And then I was very focused and very early in getting that slide from my manager. I realized that I would have to run it like it was a separate business unrelated to Google. And so I sort of took that mindset of, if this is not successful, I'm not getting paid, even though, I would probably be moved into a different role and still continue getting paid. But I sort of artificially scared myself, layered on this adversity that if this is not successful, then my career in Google is doomed. And so I started running it as Viktoriya is the CEO of this company. And the success of this program, this company, depends on my decisions. And so I put everything I had into this program and became as creative and fearless. When you take that attitude that, I have to do whatever it takes or my company doesn't get to survive, then you become fearless. Then you start hanging flyers. I don't know if you remember learning on the Loo, which were flyers that we had in the bathroom that we could use for learning. So hanging things in the bathroom.
You did that?
Yes. To promote the program, asking to meet with people at the highest levels to tell them about the program and their team's success. asking to be featured at Accelerate, which is our sales kickoff, being part of our next events, promoting the program to partners and a little bit to sellers because they attend as well. But it makes you, when you apply the pressure on yourself, it makes you a little less afraid, because it's kind of your baby that you're raising and you want them to go big.
Yeah, and there are two things there, and I will really wrap this up after that. The fearless, I think, is a key attribute that you have. Like some people would have been afraid to apply to Google, and you're like, I'm applying there. I heard that they're hiring 6,500 people, so why can't they hire me? So that's awesome, and not everybody has that fearlessness. Secondly, I think your willingness to roll up your sleeves and get your hands dirty, whether it's renting the chairs in Belmont, I think you said it was, or learning on the loo, which at Google, because Google focused so much on productivity over the urinals in the guy's bathroom, I guess in the stalls with the woman's bathroom, they had these flyers, learning on the loo, that people would read while they're urinating or whatever. And people had to put the signs in there. And I never really thought about who did that. But you were like, you wanted to advertise your program so much that you went into the bathrooms and made sure it was up there. So
there's actually a special team. You have to go through a set of approvals, and then they distribute the flyers. But yeah, I did that along with many other things. Okay,
cool. Well, whether you were the one in the loo or you figured out how to get other people in the loo, but just the scrappiness is awesome. Scrappiness and fearlessness. Awesome, Viktoriya. But thank you so much for joining the podcast. You have such an impressive career, and some people move around. You've just moved up and gotten shit done, helped people out. And I think you're focused on trying to help people, be accommodating, and your track record of getting shit done speaks for itself. And plus, you're super generous and nice. So that's good too.
I think Viktoriya is an inspiration to everyone who wants to steer their career in a successful direction. It was a pleasure having you on the show with Alan today, and it's a pleasure to see all of the listeners that are enjoying the SYCK Career Podcast. Make sure you check in with the website at syckpodcast.com, and remember, it's SYCK. Alan, how do I get one of those cups that I see all over the website?
Oh, those are only for my special friends, Russ. But we can get you one. And actually, they are stored with my amazing exec assistant, who's just up some highway from you in Florida. So she can maybe get that for you. I'll have to see if I can pull a special favor for you.
Yeah, I really, every time I say, I got to get me one of those cups. They're really cool. All right, well, thank you for hanging out for today's SYCK Tricks episode. For Alan Stein, I'm Russ Reba, and you're going to love the next episode.